Welcome to Tale of Deceitful Matrimony. Once I thought marriage symbolized unity, now I realize it can symbolize corporate takeover. I am Ethan, and 3 years ago, my spouse Brooke disclosed something that altered everything. Your thoughts on the matter hold no significance. She didn't reveal this during a heated dispute or in a moment of anger she later regretted. Instead, she stated it casually, as if explaining simple arithmetic to a child. We were seated at our kitchen table discussing a mortgage refinancing choice for our home. A house I had contributed the down payment to, a house with my name on the deed, a house where I had labored diligently for 5 years to maintain and upgrade. According to Brooke, however, my opinion regarding our decisions regarding that home was inconsequential. That moment marked when I ceased being a spouse and became an investigator. Our marriage hadn't always been tumultuous. When we first met 7 years prior, Brooke was a driven marketing manager with ambition. As a software engineer at a stable tech firm, earning a decent income yet living frugally, I was married to a woman who had similar ideals about constructing our future together. Our skills complemented each other. She was the strategic planner, while I was the practical executor. Her ambitions were vast. My role was to make those dreams financially achievable. However, issues started emerging approximately 2 years into our marriage, subtly at first. Brooke began making decisions without consulting me, initially about trivial matters like scheduling vacations or making purchases. She'd later justify these actions. She also scheduled social engagements I was not keen on. When I expressed concerns, she'd attribute them to my supposed lack of spontaneity or excessive control. Somehow, I always found myself apologizing. The financial disputes soon followed. Brooke wanted to renovate our kitchen immediately using a home equity line of credit, whereas I proposed saving for 6 months and paying cash. We argued over this for weeks. After persistent persuasion, we retrieved the HELOC, with the renovation expenses escalating 30% beyond the estimated quote and requiring a year to repay. Throughout this period, Brooke criticized me for not negotiating contractor fees more aggressively. Ironically, the same contractors she'd advocated for. Subsequently, the idea of an investment property emerged. Brooke had identified a rental condo that appealed to her as an investment. Despite financial constraints and optimistic revenue projections, she presented intricate calculations demonstrating wealth accumulation. I harbored doubts about incurring more debt, questioning the accuracy of projected rental income and the attractiveness of the location as claimed. She dismissed me as risk-adverse and hindering her aspirations. We proceeded to purchase the property. Within 8 months, we experienced 3 different tenants, 2 months of vacancy, and a costly plumbing emergency, which made the property cash flow negatively. Brooke criticized my lack of thorough investigation despite her selecting every aspect, from the property to the property manager. The trend was evident. Brooke made decisions I voiced reservations about, yet she persisted, and eventually it was my fault for not halting her or providing insufficient support. It was a labyrinth of psychology where all escape routes led to me being at fault, but I continued trying. I proposed we consult a financial advisor jointly. Brooke argued against the need for such expenditure. I recommended regular budget meetings where we discuss and plan expenses together. She attended twice, then deemed them overbearing and ceased attending. I suggested a rule requiring mutual consent for expenses exceeding $5,000. She accused me of attempting to financially abuse her by restricting her freedom. That's when I understood a significant fact. Brooke did not desire a partner. She wanted a joint bank account with occasional sexual privileges. The conversation about refinancing pushed me over the edge. Upon arriving home from work on Thursday, I discovered Brooke at the kitchen table, surrounded by paperwork. She greeted me with a radiant grin and shared some positive news. She had found a method to consolidate all our debts and decrease our monthly payments. My stomach knotted as I asked, "What debt are we consolidating?" Her response encompassed the HELOC, investment property mortgage, both car loans, my credit cards. She mentioned that we had been approved for a cash-out refinance which would provide some breathing room. I sank into a chair slowly. It appeared she applied for a refinance without discussing it with me first. She explained, still grinning, "I wanted to ensure we qualified before raising your expectations." However, Brooke and I need to discuss matters like this prior to applying. What's the interest rate? What's the term? How much cash are we taking out? Her smile vanished at my follow-up questions. "Why do you always have such a negative attitude?" She responded, "I'm just trying to improve our financial situation. Instead of reducing debt by paying it off, You're suggesting we consolidate and stretch payments over 30 years in a mortgage, which is financially misguided. You lack financial acumen, she asserted bluntly. I've spent over a decade working with spreadsheets and financial modeling at my job. I have a good grasp of finance. Explain it to me. Lower monthly payments are attractive because we're stretching out the duration, but this means we'll pay triple in interest over the loan period. We'll have cash flow now, invest the saved funds, and potentially gain more. However, have we effectively invested any money during the last 5 years? This question elicited a change in her demeanor from frustrated to frosty. Ethan, I've already signed the documents. The broker emphasized the need for speed to secure this rate. Tonight you must sign as well. You didn't bring it up earlier, so your opinion is irrelevant. We're going through with this. It's what's best for us, she stated decisively. The room felt disorienting. Not, I believe this is the best option, or we should definitely do this. Rather, a declaration that we're proceeding without considering other alternatives. In plain terms, it was stated that my view on a decision affecting our financial futures for 3 decades held no weight. Sitting across her with paperwork before her unfazed, I realized I was unaware of who I had wed that night. I declined to sign anything, instead requesting time to review the documents with our lawyer. She didn't need an attorney for a refinance, she retorted, rising and taking the papers. Fine, she said, be obstinate. This is moving forward regardless. She left the kitchen. In silence, I listened to her footsteps ascending stairs and decided then and there. I was tired of waging battles I couldn't prevail in. It was time for victory in the grand scheme. The following morning, I took an unexpected day off from work without informing Brooke. Instead, I sought legal counsel from a family attorney named Coleman Barrett, whose name had been recommended by a colleague experiencing his own divorce. In his late 40s, Coleman bore the weary eyes of one who'd confronted numerous types of marital strife. I shared the predicament, her one-sided choices, the financial turmoil, and now the property refinance she'd executed without my knowledge. "Did you sign the documents?" he inquired. "No. Avoid doing so. If she falsified your signature, that's fraud. If she's compelling you to sign under duress, that's another issue entirely." Leaning closer, he added. "However, what troubles me more, you mentioned she had already signed. Yes, refinancing a jointly owned property necessitates the consent of both spouses. If she signed without you, she either forged your signature or is lying about having signed. Something else may be amiss." A shiver ran down my spine. What other possibilities could there be? Have her been privy to your identification documents, birth certificate, social security card, passport? They're kept in our home office. We both have access. Coleman nodded solemnly in response. "Consider a suggestion that might appear drastic, but I've noticed a recurring pattern. I advise you to engage a forensic accountant to scrutinize all your financial records, credit histories, and property deeds. All relevant documentation pertaining to your finances should be reviewed. It is crucial to ascertain if any actions have been taken without your awareness. This might seem costly, but it's less expensive than finding out 5 years from now that your credit has been damaged and you are liable for debts you were unaware of." I immediately hired a forensic accountant named Tucker Cross, who specialized in marital financial investigations in the afternoon. Tucker possessed the demeanor of a tax auditor, having spent 15 years in that role before moving to private practice. He found pleasure in uncovering inconsistencies that would leave ordinary people despairing from tedium. "I'll require your authorization to access everything," Tucker stated. "This includes credit reports, bank statements, property deeds, loan documents, tax returns." If her creativity was evident, we would discover it. I approved the authorizations. Tucker promised initial results within a week. Afterward, I returned home and pretended nothing was amiss. Brooke inquired about my change of heart regarding refinancing. I mentioned I was still scrutinizing the documents. She sighed but didn't persist. We ate supper in near quiet, watched TV in separate rooms, and retired to our respective beds with a vast distance between us. The ensuing days echoed the anxiety of waiting for negative medical test results. I continued my work duties and returned home to a spouse who was increasingly antagonistic due to my refusal to sign her documents. On the 5th day, she disclosed that she'd found an alternative method for debt restructuring which didn't necessitate my signature. I inquired about the implications. She suggested I not concern myself with it. That was when I realized Tucker would uncover something dire. His call arrived on the 8th day. "A meeting in person is required," he said, suggesting today if feasible. I met him at Coleman's law office. 2 men sat in a conference room, their manila folders arranged like munitions. Tucker flipped open the initial folder. Let's begin with petty fraud and progress to substantial fraud. My throat went parched. 3 months back, your spouse had secretly opened a Capital One credit card in your name, boasting a $20,000 limit. Despite making timely payments, it hadn't affected your credit score yet. However, you remain legally accountable for the unspent $20,000. He moved to the second folder. 5 months ago, she had obtained a personal loan from an online lender, a $15,000 debt at an 18% interest rate, listing your name, social security number, and a forged version of your signature on electronic documents. The third folder revealed details about the joint investment property. Without your knowledge, she had refinanced it 8 weeks prior, extracting $40,000 in cash. Now the property is underwater, with both parties responsible for a debt exceeding its current value. I struggled to draw breath. How could she perform all this covertly? Tucker claimed that signatures on these documents were forgeries, albeit passable ones. The lenders carried out automated checks, ensuring the social security number, name, and date of birth matched, and your credit was good. However, no one physically confirmed it was you who applied. Coleman interjected, asserting this is identity theft and criminal fraud. Each occurrence constitutes a separate felony. Tucker added more revelations. He opened the thickest folder. The house you reside in, believed to be jointly owned, what about that? 2 weeks ago, 3 days after you declined to sign her refinance documents, your wife filed a quitclaim deed, removing your name from the title. She allegedly forged your signature, making the property hers exclusively. The room spun at the thought that can't be possible. Don't I have to be informed? You do, Coleman confirmed. If the county clerk's office receives a seemingly valid quitclaim deed with both signatures and a notary stamp, they record it. However, a forged notarization is another felony. Tucker went on to say that she quickly took out a second mortgage on the property, this time a cash-out refinance worth $80,000, which was deposited into an account with only her name on it. I looked at the documents before me, wondering the total amount. Tucker checked his records. The combined credit card debt, personal loan, investment property cash-out, and house second mortgage amounted to roughly $175,000 in debt, either under your name or joint assets. Approximately $120,000 was money put into accounts you don't have access to. Where did the funds go? That's intriguing, Tucker explained. She has been transferring it in installments to an LLC she established 6 months ago. The LLC subsequently remitted $60,000 to real estate broker Felix Pierce as an initial payment for a commercial property, according to Coleman. She's constructing a distinct fiscal existence, leveraging your credit, possessions, and identity to finance it. When this edifice crumbles, you'll be left with the debt and damaged credit. Your business assets will be shielded under the LLC, allowing you to claim obliviousness about the fraud. I felt as if I were losing my footing. All internal warnings advised me to reach out to Brooke to seek clarification and demand answers. However, Coleman had forewarned me about this juncture. Don't disclose that we're aware of anything, he'd cautioned during our initial encounter. The instant she discerns your investigations, she'll either eliminate proof or expedite her plans. Our objective is to keep her at ease. Consequently, I returned home that evening and shared a meal with a woman who had pilfered my identity and prospects. I inquired about her day. She recounted a demanding client at work. We deliberated over what to stream on Netflix. She retired early. I spent a late night contemplating, unable to comprehend how I overlooked that my spouse was involved in criminal activities. The next day, Coleman filed 3 documents concurrently: a petition for divorce, an urgent order freezing all accounts bearing my name or social security number, and a motion claiming exclusive access and ownership of the matrimonial home. The petition came with a 12-page attachment detailing every fraudulent act discovered by Tucker, backed by evidence. We also submitted a police report, which was reviewed by the assigned detective who initiated a fraud investigation. Brooke was served at her office at 2:00 p.m. My phone started buzzing nonstop with texts and calls at 2:45 p.m. I chose not to answer them. Coleman had advised me to communicate only through him from now on. At 6:00 p.m., Brooke returned home, finding me seated in the living room, my essential possessions already packed in my car parked at Coleman's office. She stood in the doorway, clinging to papers, her face pale with fury. "What on earth have you done?" I announced my intention for a divorce and reported identity theft and fraud to the police. "I'm ready to discuss it all, but you don't need an explanation. I want you to understand that your thoughts regarding future actions are irrelevant," her expression contorted. "Ethan, please, we can find a resolution." No, there is none. You have committed several felonies using my identity. You falsified my signature on legal documents. You've been quietly emptying my accounts while sharing our bed. There's nothing left to resolve. I was making an effort for us. You were creating opportunities for yourself, utilizing my credit as a construction loan. She broke into tears. Sincere tears, deep sobs. A portion of me felt sympathy towards her. However, the larger part recalled her chilling gaze when she dismissed my opinion. I'm leaving right now, I declared. The house is under court protection. Kindly leave behind only what clearly belongs to you. Your lawyer could reach out to mine regarding your possessions access. Where you're heading is no longer your issue anymore. I moved past her and exited the premises. She called out to me, begging, haggling, threatening. I climbed into my vehicle and departed. The ensuing half a year was a legal battlefield. Brooks' attorney, Monroe Walsh, employed every conceivable strategy. They asserted that I had granted approval for all actions. They contended the debt was communal debt regardless of whose name it bore. They suggested the house was always meant to be Brooks' individual property. They portrayed me as a domineering spouse who compelled her to resort to extreme financial measures to gain independence. It unraveled when Tucker presented the chronology during his deposition. Every document, every transaction, every falsified signature had a timestamp and cross-references. The credit card was opened during my business trip. The personal loan was approved while I was visiting my parents. 3 days post my refusal to sign refinance documents, a quitclaim deed was filed. This pattern suggested Brooks' actions were undertaken when I wasn't present to intervene and acted independently. A forensic handwriting analysis invalidated their claim of consent. 3 experts concurred the signatures weren't mine. The notary who supposedly witnessed my signature on the quitclaim deed had never met me, couldn't explain how she notarized a document without verifying identity. She subsequently lost her commission and faced charges. The commercial property owned by Brooks LLC became crucial evidence for the prosecution. Text messages between Brooke and her unknown business partner, a boyfriend, discussed maximizing value before the divorce. This was a calculated move, not hasty maneuvering. It was premeditated theft. Judge Christian Hayes presided over our divorce case 6 months after I filed. 60-year-old man, strict on family law fraud, was chosen specifically by Coleman. The courtroom wasn't like TV dramas. It was brightly lit with bureaucratic aura, echoing harshly and providing uncomfortable seating. Brooke sat at the defendant's table alongside Monroe, dressed conservatively for this case. She seemed smaller than before, weakened. For 90 minutes, Tucker testified, detailing each fraudulent transaction with bank records, fake documents, and timeline evidence. Brooks' lawyer attempted to challenge his findings. Tucker had foreseen every question. He had created a trail of audit that could withstand a nuclear blast. Coleman presented the financial demands in the divorce petition. A full refund of all fraudulent debts, credit restoration, sole ownership of the marital home, and attorney fees were requested. Nothing was sought for Brooke from the marriage. Monroe claimed that certain debts were for marital matters and should be divided. Judge Hayes sought examples, to which Monroe struggled to respond, mentioning property renovation and household expenses. Tucker presented bank records indicating the funds went to Brooks LLC, her boyfriend's rent, and extravagant purchases I hadn't witnessed before. Next up was my turn to testify. Coleman guided me through our marriage, the regular behaviors, the financial turmoil, and eventually the conversation about refinancing. "What did your spouse say when you voiced worries about signing the documents?" Coleman inquired. She stated that my viewpoint was irrelevant. Exactly those words were used. "What did that imply to you?" I felt I had no partner. Instead, I had someone working against me. Monroe attempted to portray me as financially dominating and forcing Brooke into drastic actions during cross-examination. However, Coleman had thoroughly prepared me for the trial. I responded composedly to each query, referenced corroborating evidence when available, and avoided reacting in a way that seemed emotional or vengeful. The trial reached its peak when Coleman summoned Brooke to the stand. Against her attorney's counsel, she chose to testify, wishing to share her perspective. She described feeling entrapped in the marriage, detailed financial control, and justified her actions as necessary for self-protection. Strategically, she shed tears, presented herself as a victim of emotional manipulation. However, Coleman unveiled printed text messages between Brooke and her boyfriend, which Tucker had obtained through discovery from her phone records on April 14th. "Got the credit card approved in his name. He has no idea. $20,000 to work with now." Upon seeing this, Brooke paled. "This statement was taken out of context," she admitted. What circumstances make identity theft acceptable? I had meant to inform him about it. Did you inform him about the credit card you secretly opened in his name and ran up for 3 months without his knowledge? Asked Coleman, showing another text. Yes, replied Coleman, producing a new message. Was this sent on May 2nd? I filed the quitclaim deed today. The house is mine now. He still believes we co-own it. The lawyer says he has no recourse once it's recorded. I was safeguarding my interests. By forging his signature and stealing his property, objected Monroe, but Judge Hayes overruled. Coleman continued, was this sent on May 8th? We must act swiftly before he discovers the truth. Can you withdraw another $40,000 from the house equity? We need it for the commercial property down payment. Brooke remained speechless. She was ensnared by her own words as the elaborate victim narrative she had woven crumbled under her own admissions of premeditated fraud. Coleman allowed the silence to linger before whispering, "No more questions, Your Honor." Judge Hayes announced a recess. Upon our return, his verdict was swift and merciless. Overseeing countless divorces, I've encountered various financial deceits and betrayals. However, the actions you've undertaken, Mrs. Whitmore, surpass them all. You haven't merely violated your marital promises, you orchestrated systematic, premeditated fraud against your spouse over several months. You forged legal papers. You misused his identity. You manipulated the legal system to transfer property. This was not yours to take. And you did it while residing in his house, enjoying his income and pretending to be his partner. Brooke remained quiet, weeping. Judge Hayes added, "The divorce is finalized. The marital home belongs exclusively to Mr. Whitmore. Mrs. Whitmore, you are instructed to complete all necessary documents to rescind the fraudulent quitclaim deed and reinstate Mr. Whitmore as the rightful owner. You personally owe for all debts amassed through identity theft. The restitution required is to reinstate Whitmore's credit to its original standing, prior to your illegal activities. You are obliged to cover his legal fees entirely, amounting to $78,000. You must also liquidate the LLC and forfeit all assets bought with ill-gotten funds, including the commercial property. Furthermore, I will submit this case to the district attorney for potential criminal prosecution. Your actions were not merely civil misconduct. They were criminal." The gavel was hammered down. Brooke broke down in Monroe's embrace. I remained feeling empty. Despite winning everything, it felt like standing amidst the remnants of my former life. The criminal trial dragged on for another year. Eventually, Brooke admitted guilt to 9 felonies, 7 counts of identity theft, 1 count of forgery, and 1 count of grand theft. She was sentenced to serve 1 year in prison, followed by 5 years of probation, with 2 years suspended. The accomplice, entangled in charges related to the LLC, received an 18-month sentence. I regained my house and re-established my credit after debts were eliminated from my liability, despite prolonged administrative work and court orders. Brooke's lawyers attempted to contest the financial ruling, stating it was excessive. However, the higher court affirmed the decision in its entirety. She opted for bankruptcy, but this did not discharge the judgment against her due to its origin from intentional and harmful actions. She will likely repay me incrementally for the remainder of her life, with payments never adding up to the full amount. Often, people question if I harbor hatred towards her. Yet I don't. Hatred necessitates caring about someone, and at this point, I no longer care about Brooke. She serves as a warning tale, a name on legal documents I seldom see, a prompt to heed my intuition when something seems amiss. What I gleaned from this experience isn't that marriage is treacherous, or women are deceivers, or any other worn-out cliché of a disillusioned divorcee. In partnership, mutual respect is essential. If someone dismisses your opinions, not only financially but in any matter, they are revealing their character. Trust them, for I am now dating with caution, disclosing my issues, acknowledging my trust difficulties, maintaining meticulous financial records, and ready to leave at the slightest hint of dishonesty. Interestingly, independent women find this approach reassuring instead of paranoid. Recently, I refinanced the house, scrutinizing every document, comprehending every term, and signing personally. The interest rate was lower than what Brooke attempted to manipulate, saving me $400 monthly. I could have withdrawn cash, but the bank offered $100,000 in equity, which I refused, as I don't believe in exploiting my home for unearned income or funding ill-conceived plans. What I value is the knowledge that my opinion matters, particularly to me, and that is sufficient.